Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today to talk about part four of The Darkness That Comes Before. It's a spoiler-filled discussion, so if you haven't read it, then don't read, don't listen. Come back and listen later. So we'll go around the room really quickly and give some introductions. Katerina, you want to start us off with a quick introduction?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Katerina. I have read the entire first trilogy, the Prince of Nothing trilogy, by R. Scott Baker, and I'm currently making my way through the second series, the Aspect Emperor. And so this is a reread for me, which doesn't necessarily mean I always understand everything in this book, but I'm trying my best.
And Daniel?
And I'm Daniel, and this is my third reread, I guess. And I also don't understand everything, so I will just try to do my best to give justice to R. Scott Baker's world.
That was well said. Yeah, it's my second. It's my second read of this book. I haven't read the second book at all yet, so that'll be really interesting because I didn't know anything the first time I read this one, and I know a little bit more this time, but not nearly as much as I thought I would. So, part four. This was I think we were talking a little bit before we went live. It doesn't seem like a long part, but it's packed.
Yeah, I don't think that necessarily a lot of things happen in this part, but we get a lot of there's a lot of psychology, so we get a lot more insight into some of the characters that we've already met. So Nayor and Callus. Also, some new characters, important characters, are introduced, um, and there's a lot of we also get a lot of like background on who they are and like sort of where they're coming from, and there's a lot of like psychological battles in this part, which sometimes I find myself pretty lost trying to like decipher who's battling who and who's winning over whom. So maybe you guys will be able to help me with it a little bit.
I don't know. Maybe
Kel-
Daniel can help us both.
Kellis just always wins eventually.
Well, he didn't seem so sure that he was winning while I was reading these chapters. He seemed pretty taken aback by Nayor being so able to defy his manipulations, which is not something that Kellis has been used to, at least with the people he's met on his way to the Genuati step.
Yeah, that's true. He's had 30 years to think about how he got played by Kellis's dad, so his understanding of the Dunyan is more than anyone besides the Dunyan currently. And I think Kellis even like says, "What is this, father? A mistake?" Like he thinks he shouldn't have let Snare live because he's too smart now. That's probably another reason why Nair is so weird himself because he got manipulated by Kellis's dad and like shown the other way of things. So he's just always contemplating deeper than the ultimate, whose tracks are really deep in customs and history.
Yeah, like we did get to learn more about Nayor's history with Moangus, how they met and how that meeting impacted Nayor, um, and about the relationship. Like, I mean, it's kind of implied that they like basically Moangus seduced Nayor and that they had some sort of, if not like sexual, then at least very intimate relationship between the two of them, and that Moangus used that to plan his escape from the Skilvendi, from the Urema tribe, and to kill Nayor's father, right?
Yep, yep, that seems to be true. And just Kellis is trying to find out through his talking to Nair exactly how much his dad exposed of the Dunyane's like technique and philosophies and just sickness.
That's a good way to describe it.
And I guess the chapter starts off with Nair, but even before that, it talks about how Kellis had found himself where Nair finds him. And he, I guess, went to Etrithau and like formed a little cult of 47 people that he like swayed and called his little Dunyane. And he took them all and fled into the wilderness and didn't make it all the way. But for some reason ended up on the grave of Nair's father, where Nair found him.
Yeah, which is it's pretty symptomatic that Nayor finds the son of his father's killer on the barrow of his own father. Um,
Yeah, how deep can coincidences be, really?
Hmm.
And then it says like Moingus looked at him and he looked, or Nair looked at him and he looked at Nair, and they both seen Moingus in each other's eyes, which was crazy because Nair seen him visually, but Kellis just could see the recognition in Nair's reactions.
I was just excited to see Callus again because I must have I think the first time I read it, I forgot about the prologue by the time I got to this point. This time, thanks to both of you, I remembered Callus this time from the prologue. And oh, that's the guy from the prologue. So
yeah, I mean, we haven't seen him for some like 200, 300 pages. And yeah, and the last time we saw him, I don't think he didn't even make it to Erythral yet, right? So it's been a while for Callus, and he's traveled a pretty long distance since we last saw him to get from Erythral all the way to basically like the border of the Nansor Empire.
and I did enjoy the going over what Molingus had taught him about um, not taking the same path, finding your own way, kind of different ways of thinking that he didn't really consider before. So almost like change his whole perspective. Kind of give some
He,
background on him.
he kind of tells him that the Sylvendi worship like the trackless steppe, a broad open plain where they can go anywhere and there's no paths in the ground, and their customs and their history make their path like a mountain pass where everyone has to go on the same path. It's not an open steppe like they should strive to be. Basically saying your customs aren't right now, kill your dad, and I'm out of here. And the Dunyane used truth as like a weapon, so what he said isn't wrong, but it's all to steer him one direction. He could just as well have steered him the exact opposite direction, made him even more loyal to the Sylvendi,
It's
because words are tricky.
well, it's funny you say that because one of the quotes I have written down was on page 362 in my edition, but it was nothing deceives so well as the truth. So
And
relating to what he
Yeah,
mentioned.
and it's interesting and heartbreaking to see that, like for Nior, learning that truth, or like seeing his people and their ways through a different lens, how that actually makes him the outcast and someone who can never really return back to be like a valid member of the society, because now he's seen otherwise. He sort of stepped out of of the system, and like he spends the whole time after Moangas leaves sort of trying to get back, trying to find a place among his people, and he just can't. Like they're not willing to accept him back because of the things he did in the past, but I probably also because he's just he's different from them. He thinks differently, and you sort of see how knowing the truth breaks him. Like it's not a good thing for him that he can see through the haze and through the Sylvandi customs and habits and sort of the nonsensical part of it. Like it makes him an outcast.
And kind of the same thing happened to Moengus when he initially left Ishul. He was gone just to check out like what the outsiders knew and how big of a threat it was, and then he came back and they were like, "Oh, you're different now. We don't want you here anymore. You know too much," and so they kicked Moengus out.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you think about what's going to happen to Callus if he succeeds in killing Moangus. Like, will he be able to go back to the Dunyain, or will they just cast him out as they did with Moangus?
This chapter talks a little bit about the Dunyain and their philosophies, if you'll call them that, and logic is superior to all. So I'd say Kellis will have used, like, his usefulness will be up by that time. And if he's really a Dunyan, he'll probably kill himself for them, so they don't even have to waste any breath.
So are you saying that Moangos was a bad Dunyain in that he did not kill himself?
I think so. Yeah. It's survival of the fittest to the Dunyan. It's logic above all other, and he broke the logic of chasing the shortest path in their eyes. Even though in Moengus's eyes, he'd probably learned of all the lies that the Dunyan had started their belief on. No magic, no history. History's bad. And then Moengus got out and seen the connections to it all and realized that maybe the Dunyan are walking towards a dead end. Because sometimes the shortest path just ends up being a dead end in the end.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, well, the Daini, like, because they like use this super ultra rationality, like they operate with certain set of variables, right? But if you're isolated, then the set of variables which you can operate is limited. So by leaving the seclusion and going into the world, Moenges has access to a lot more information than the other Dunyan. So maybe, he's realized things that they just have not been able to calculate. Who knows?
As they call it, travel deeper into the absolute. He's traveled deeper into the absolute than any other Dunyan because they all only have the information that they've had for 2,000 years now. So maybe they've evolved as far as the absolute will allow them. In the first part, it says that they know what way a leaf's going to fall. They know what someone's going to say before they say it. They're like living in a perfect, boring society at this point.
Yeah, it's
Still
a very
haven't got the absolute. They're still after it.
it's a very controlled environment that they inhibit.
And then this part, Nir is talking to Kellis, and they talk about love, because he's wondering if he'll really kill his dad, and then Kellis is like, "We don't love. That's not logical." And then Snare's like, "Oh yeah, that's probably true." And it also, we get a little section through Kellis's eyes, and he says, "If humans only knew what I seen, and then it like talks about how he just sees 42 muscles in the face and everything behind the muscles instead of actually seeing a human face. He just sees straight through it. So humans are just not humans to him. They're just animals or books to be read almost like a book.
And the way he behaves later makes kind of sets up what happens later on in this part about not loving and just seeing people as just books to be read.
Yep. And we also get a quote which uh, explains the title of this book. I don't think we had it before. I think it's the first time we hear it in this part, where Callus is explaining the Danyain and how they operate, and he explains what the darkness that comes before is, and he says, "If you are the movement of your soul, and the cause of that movement precedes you, and how could you ever call your thoughts your own? How could you be anything but a slave to the darkness that comes before?" So if you didn't know why this book was called the way it is, now you know.
And also, that is true, but later on, they're discussing how they're gonna like infiltrate the Holy War, and they decide that Kellis is gonna say he's a prince of Atrothau, which is like a dead city, or not. Maybe it was north of that. I don't remember what the place was, but some dead city he's the prince of. And then Snare's like, "Oh, so you're the prince of nothing," because it's just a lie built to get them into the Holy War. Nair directly
Yeah.
calls him the Prince of Nothing, but also the darkness that comes before is like a theme of the whole Second Apocalypse books. So it's not the only double entendre in this book. There's lots of layers to almost everything.
Was there a reference to the title in the prologue? I remember there was something being, but maybe I'm wrong. But I thought I remember there was a reference, but I couldn't remember for sure.
Well, technically, the little prince, like his his dad died, and everyone died around him, and so he rules over a castle of nothing after he killed the what am I thinking? The guy that sings, Jester.
Jester.
Oh. Was there a jester?
It's the guy at the beginning that touches the little boy, and then the little boy kicks
Um,
off the
I think it
ledge.
was a bard. Wasn't he a bard, maybe?
Yeah, Bard, a
Oh,
singer.
Bard. Yeah.
And then he becomes the Prince of Nothing, an entire castle all to his own.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't think of it that way, but it's true that we meet a prince who literally rules over nothing and nobody right in the prologue. But here it refers more directly to Callus. Um,
Being able to own the nothingness that comes before people's thoughts.
The fight between with Kellis and Nair when they fight the tribesmen, and that's the character I'm sure we're talking about. Is it Surrey? Is that how you pronounce it?
I
Survey?
say Surway. I don't know if it's correct. Wait, let me check the book.
Oh, yeah, we can always check the. I always forget about that. It's probably Survey.
I say Survey too.
Yeah. Saraway. Yeah.
Yeah, Surway. Oh, she's
Hearing
only
her
19. Oh
yeah, hearing
God.
her backstory, that, that was rough.
She kind of
Yes.
reminds me of like Sansa Stark that got a bad lot in life. And the first time I read it, I didn't think of her like that, but this time I thought of her more. I don't think I'd read the Game of Thrones at that point. She just reminds me a little bit of Sansa at this point, just not in a good position.
Yeah.
Not in a good position at all. I think there are also parallels that you can draw with Esmenet in the way that like she's a woman who has essentially no power, no agency whatsoever, and she like her body and sex are the only tools that she has and that she can use to obtain at least any sort of like position or a social status. And she's sort of like she doesn't want to, but she's put in a situation where if she wants to have at least a bit of a good life for herself, she's kind of forced to use her body to improve her life, and improve it by giving herself to the men who actually hold the power in this world. But I think unlike Esmeralda, she maybe lacks the strength of character, or maybe it's just that like they find themselves in slightly just different circumstances. But I think Cervais is much more damaged by the experiences that she's had than Esmenet is. Like, despite everything, I think Esmenet seems to come out as a strong person at the end of the day. I don't know how you feel about sort of the differences between the two characters.
Eh, I think that Serway is like the young, naive version of Essenet, because Essenet had bad things happen to her, and they obviously had devastated her, but that was 30 years ago. So she's just kind of moved beyond that hurt being as powerful as it is to a younger person. And Serway's really hopeful all the time. She just thinks that Kellis loves her, and she thinks that everything's going to end up good, and she thinks that he'll kill Nair if he's real bad, and she thinks she
Well,
can save a little boy.
yeah, I wonder if it's some sort of a Stockholm syndrome. Um, 'Cause I'll be honest, the first time I read this book, I found it really difficult to empathize with Survey. Like I felt bad for her for all the terrible things that were happening to her, but then I just thought that she was so weak or so gullible, and the way that she just latched onto Kellis irritated me so much. Because like yes, he's marginally nicer to her than Nayor, but like he does not, go and rape her every night, but he's still there, sitting at the fire, watching Nayor do it, and does nothing to stop him. And I was so angry that like she would not see how Callis just did not care about her at all. Um, but reading through the book this time, I feel like I have a lot more understanding for the things she's been through and how, yeah, as you said, like she's just, like such a hopeful like character. Like she's always trying to find something good in this situation, and I guess she doesn't really have anything else than to imagine that Callus is somehow going to save her, even though it's not really anything he's done so far.
But he does, actually, in this part. Nair's like, leave her, and Kellis says no for some reason, which Nair's like, that's even like points out that that's uncharacteristic for a Dunyan.
Yeah, but
They
I
only
think
want their weapons around, so maybe she's a weapon.
Yeah, maybe. I think the way I understood it was that Nayor thought that if they left her, the Nansur wouldn't actually hurt her, because she was not like, yeah, maybe they would take her as like a concubine, but they wouldn't kill her because she wasn't important, and they were chasing after Nayor and Callus. So taking them with her was actually riskier for her. Like it put her life in danger, but I'm not sure.
Hmm.
But it's true that Callus makes the decision to bring them with her, so maybe he has some use for her. But I'm not sure that's necessarily that's necessarily something that Serway will profit from. I'm very skeptical about that.
There's there's not very many people that profit from being used by the Dunyan. Lewis knows that. The 47 little Dunyan all know that by now, I think.
The other women who were with the tribesmen when they when they kill the tribesmen and they beg to go with them to be their prisoners, and they don't take the women with them. The forget exactly how it's worded, but when they shoot the one in the mouth with the arrow, was a because the to go from a prisoner to being free, and then they want to be prisoners again. They don't want to be free because what's worse
Being
is being a
stuck in the
prisoner.
woods,
Yeah,
dying, or being a prisoner all the way back to town.
yeah. So
And then Serway was like elated because she hated her.
yeah,
Serway hated all of those people, really.
yeah. And we get the backstory of her. Um, when she comes into the house and she's sold off, and the way that the other women treated her, and because I'm guessing just because she was younger and um, kind of the fresh meat, but that was. And you wonder, what would you rather do in that situation? Would you rather be on your own in this world, or would you rather be a prisoner?
Yeah, I
I'm
think
going if I
that's
could live on my own or not. I don't think they have the skills to take care of themselves in the wilderness like
Yeah,
Nair can, so they probably should follow them.
yeah, they probably have a higher chance of survival with Nayor. At least he knows how to navigate the steppe. But you might also just decide to like randomly that he wants to kill them because they irritate him. But I mean, I like what the point you brought up about sort of the women being pitted against each other in the
mm.
household. I think, like, obviously, like patriarchy is a big theme in these books, um, and I mean, I like that I like that he shows the sort of idea that like women in this sort of system where they don't really have access to power and they can only attain it through sort of attaching themselves to men, how that forces the women to, instead of sort of sticking together, to fight each other and fight for positions, um, and how destructive it is for the women. So I really like that little detail. Um,
Yeah, and about her blue baby that might not have been a blue baby. I guess it's a Schrodinger's cat baby to her because she was told that it lived, but afterwards, what everyone told her it died at first. Why she couldn't have a kid because she's basically a slave.
yeah, I mean it's pretty tragic, like the things she goes through. Like first, her own father sells her to essentially slavery. Then she sort of forced to entertain these men. Then she gets pregnant and she can't even keep the baby, which seems like one of the few things that actually made her happy. And then the men leave and they're raided by the Skilvendi and kidnapped, and they bring them through the whole step. It's she's had a pretty rough deal handed to her. Um,
Yep, and
Yeah.
she's pretty young too. She's still got a lot of things that could happen to her.
Yeah. It her backstory and her younger years and growing up, and it sounded like a peaceful place, and all of a sudden she just gets sold off. So it was tough to read her backstory.
yeah, I think it's maybe like one of the differences between her and Esmenet. Maybe like because from what I recall, I don't think that Esmenet really had like a peaceful and sheltered childhood. I think Esmenet grew up pretty poor and destitute from the beginning. So I think that might also maybe explain why Survey is a lot more gullible, a lot more optimistic than Esmenet, who I think is obviously older, but also I think just overall more skeptical of a character.
And the events are so damaging to Sarway where Essenet can let a lot of things just bounce off of her. She's just powerful in a certain way. I guess there's
Yeah,
lots of different kinds of powerful.
yeah, I think Esmenet has a strength of character that perhaps Survey doesn't. Which doesn't mean that Survey is a I don't know worse character or worse of a person. Um, I think it's good that there's a character represented here who's just who's weak and maybe more like a lot of people would be in her situation.
Yeah, she's a really tragic character.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Just one thing after another. Can't
Oh,
catch a
and
break.
when she kills the guy and Nair carves the swazand into her skin and tells her like what the meaning is, that was pretty powerful. We learned a lot about the Dunyan and about the Sylvendi in this part.
Yeah, I thought the explanation of the Swazant was pretty interesting. I mean, I think when we first hear about it, it just seems like sort of barbaric custom. But here you learn that like there is some meaning behind it, even if it's probably just symbolic. It's not like the scars, the Swazant, or they're not just about collecting scars or counting the number of people you've killed, but they also sort of a way of honoring the fallen, the person you you took from this world.
Yeah, and their religion makes it more powerful since they're all about like the tracks they walk on, and the Swazan symbolize like the tracks that they ended. So if you imagine it like a bunch of small streams coming into a river, the more powerful person becomes like a bigger and bigger river as they keep ending people's tracks, kind of. That's why Nair's so powerful and scary even to his own people. Even though the guy said they always make fun of him, you learn why they're not supposed to make fun of him when he died.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I
speaking
mean
of, yeah,
it's sad. Like he's so scary, and they still don't respect him. So.
and speaking of how scary he is, when him and Kellis fight, Kellis spares him and doesn't kill him when he could have. I wondered who would win that fight.
Well, now you know.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I wasn't sure at
Ne-
the time who would come out.
Nair's like the most powerful barbarian in this world, it seems like, and I think he did punch Kellis, and Kellis like seemed surprised. So Kellis doesn't have his grasp on the absolute either. He's still out here getting surprised by things.
Mm.
He tells him he needs to keep him around so he can learn about war. How true that is debatable. How true anything any of these characters say are debatable. Though, when Kellis was explaining the Dunyan to Nair, I think that was one of the more honest bits of Kellis because he didn't know how much Moingus had told him. He had to be like, he couldn't get caught lying right at the beginning. He needed to like be truthful till he could see what Moingus said to break Nair, which is about the trackless step. Step is trackless, eh?
Yeah, that's the part where I got a bit lost. Because the whole time Kellis was essentially trying to either like seduce or sort of force Nayor into trusting him and succumbing to his will, but then Nayor always seems to resist. Um, and then Kellis brings up the trackless step for some reason, and that completely shuts Nayor down. And I didn't quite understand why that was, or why Kellis mentioned the trackless step in the first place.
Because Kellis uses words as weapons. So, like when he talks, it's like statistics. You can find a
Oh
statistic to
no.
back up any single fact you want, right? Like even opposite things, like sugar's good, sugar's bad. You could say either through a statistic and be technically right if you ignore all the other facts. So Kellis is always looking for a way to do that. And he had learned enough about the Sylvendi to kind of try to make him break his customs. And he decided that like using the trackless step that they worship would be the shortest path. And he came to find that that was the same path that Moingus had chose to break Nair the first time. And since then, Nair has spent 30 years just thinking about how he got broke and how he became a weapon of a slave that he loved. And there was also the part that talked about like his escape from the compound. He like carved a bunch of swazins into his arms and took off over the hill. And Nair cried, and Nair's mom cried, and they weren't sure whether it was like because Skiatha just died, Nair's father just died, or whether it was because Moingus was leaving. And then as soon as Kellis and Nair leave, that his wife Anisi is sitting there crying, and it once again is like, was this for Kellis or was this for Nair?
Yeah,
And
I
then
really liked how the
immediately after that, you just find out that this Anisi had told Kellis everything he needed to know about Nair.
and she didn't even need to speak.
But Kellis leaves
Well,
it open as if he doesn't know how far Anisi's betrayal was, kind of. Nair's mad now. That's why he decided to start a new tribe. Carved a Swazin into Serway's arm, and now she's his tribe, he says.
oh, I didn't think that's interesting. I didn't think of it as him starting a new tribe. But that's a cool way to think about it. I thought that he was
He,
more like welcoming her into the tribe he already has, or like her becoming like Skilvendi in some way.
the moment he like left the Utamut, he I don't even know if the book necessarily says this, but just he accepted that everyone there was dead without him to defend the Utamut, that the other Sylvendi would just go in and take them all. So Anisi is gone in his eyes. He's going all like he's going to be gone for a year or two, traveling to Shime. By the time he gets back, raiding parties will have taken everything that the Utamut own because their leader isn't there anymore.
Yeah, I didn't think of the implications of that, but I did find it strange that he left his tribe as the chieftain, just there under no apparent protection of like other warriors. So I guess what you're saying makes a lot of sense. That yeah, his
His
his tribe wouldn't really be able to survive without him.
his desire for revenge was just more powerful than the customs, which he doesn't even really believe now, anyways. I think he kind of does love Anisi, but I don't think he loves anyone else in the Sylvendi tribe.
Well, they certainly haven't been very welcoming towards him.
And they're not.
Um, but I like the way that Callus and Nayor leaving the Utimate sort of mirrored Muanga's leaving the Utimate. Um, Even though like the whole time Nayor was sort of trying to prevent Callus from doing the same thing that Muanga's did. Like in the end, it seemed that both Callus and Muanga's were able to seduce, if not Nayor's wife, then his mother. And there's also the one moment where um, Nayor beats Muanga's because he's being inappropriate for a slave, and then he has this. He sort of thinks about like how, like what violence does to men, and how it's sort of this like act of intimacy, and it might reveal the need that the one person has for the other, and how they sort of try to achieve that through violence. And then the next things he does, he has Khaled beat up. I thought that was interesting, and it's just general. It made me think about more carefully about the moments when Nayor is being violent towards other people, like what that actually means, what it represents. Um, if it's just an act of a defense, or if it's him trying to express something that maybe he's not able to put into words. Because he's a violent man. Well, the most violent of men, right?
Yeah, and then their naming system is weird because Skiatha is his dad, so he's near Skiatha, whereas like the Conphus and Xerius go Ikari first, like their last name first.
Yeah, I love that detail about the world. Like the fact that they use the last name first name system, like naming basis. Like it's such a small thing, but it makes it feel very distinct. I don't think it's something I've really encountered in a lot of fantasy, and the fact that the Skillvendi use a different naming system, like that's also it just adds to the like the depth and the detail of the world, and I love that about the world building.
Like it's been lived in, and there's thousands of years of history with it, sort of. It it is interesting.
For a debut book too. It still blows my mind that this is his first book.
I started wondering reading this book how many spoilers he might have left in the second series for the third series. Because he for sure did, even though he said the third series might never come out. He had the idea for it, And the way he wrote stuff for later into this series, I can only imagine that maybe the confusing bits of the second apocalypse were meant to be confusing.
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I give R. Scott Baker more credit than he deserves, but I don't think he does anything without purpose or without like multiple connections to multiple parts of the book. It's, it's really weird. It's different than other fantasies I've read in that way.
Everything does seem really deliberate. There's no accidents. And speaking of accidents, Sirway finds the boy and tells him to run, which is probably a bad idea, and sets off this whole chain of events. And she has a chance to leave, a chance to escape, but that doesn't work out too well for her or the two men who find her.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting scene where she's like she starts fleeing and then she thinks about Kellis and decides that for some reason she has like it's better that she stays with him or that he's so important to her that she doesn't want to leave him even though it means staying with New York and living through all the terrible things that he does to her. um I don't know if it shows that like Kellis's influence is so large. Like I don't even know if Kellis is trying to be so like have such a great control over her, or if it's just her projecting herself so much onto him. Um, but like she essentially ends up like believing that he's a god walking among men, and that he's chosen her to be his betrothed, which is I don't know, interesting.
And she thinks that she's carrying his baby too, right? So she thinks that he's already that they have this connection with each other.
She he tells her directly that they've never even slept together.
Yeah.
Like, but it's your baby.
Yeah.
She's like, well, no, but whatever. That's her naivety. She just is so hopeful she'll put blinders up everywhere. Just shows how willing she is to be blind to things around her.
I kind of wondered
Yeah.
if she convinced herself of this to try and have something that she could latch onto, just to a way of coping, just to have something to live for, or just something
Yeah.
to move on with.
I sort of read it more as her doing that to cope with the situation. Like for the past like weeks, she's been raped by a New York like every night. Now she's pregnant with his baby, so her making herself believe that the baby is Callus's, like someone who she actually thinks cares about her and who's been sort of nice to her, I think, is a way of lessening the hardship of it, or like the truth of it, that she's being pregnant with her rapist baby, which like is in itself a terrible thing. So I think I read it more the way that you did, Steve.
And she does end up killing one of the men, one of the two soldiers who find her when she considers fleeing. And you kind of feel like that she takes a turn when she kills one of them with the knife, and kind of feel like something changes with her character that may have significance later. I'm not sure if it does or not, but kind of the way I read it.
I think at least it shows her that maybe she's a little bit stronger than she generally lets on. Um, obviously, like she's not like a super strong character. But even compared to the other women that she was enslaved, or they were captured with her by the other Skelendi, like she's the one who seemed more in control of herself and or handling the situation better.
And that sets up a whole chain of events that they are fleeing. And I wondered, because they're fleeing for a long time. It feels like a long time that they're fleeing. They're riding their horses to death, and they're doing whatever it takes to. They're going for days without sleep, and they must be, whoever's pursuing them must be really dedicated to be chasing them for that long.
You mean the Kidrill who are chasing them, or Callus and you're being dedicated?
Well, both.
Well, I think the Yora and Callus, like they don't really have any option. Like they know they like either they manage to get away or they're dead, or at least Neyor is because he's Gilvendi, and the Nance are not really friends or fans of this Gilvendi. Yeah, but I don't know about the Kitril. I don't remember if there is a real an explanation why they keep chasing them. I mean, I guess the fact that they killed like a large part of the group or the patrol group might be a reason enough in itself.
I think they killed 14 people, so they were expecting like a small army. And as they gave chase, they realized it was less, so the desire to catch the 2 people that had killed the 14 people became great.
Yeah, and I guess also the Kidrill they are considered like a elite troop, so it makes sense you would want to punish people who like killed one of the most important people in your army.
In one of the chapter 14, the beginning, there's a quote. Some say men continually war against circumstances, but I say perpetually flee. What are the works of men if not a momentary respite, a hiding place soon to be discovered by catastrophe? Life is endless flight before the hunter we call the world.
It's a good quote. Makes me
Yeah.
think about history and all of the ruins that are underwater right now. Pompeii.
Yeah.
You can build up awesome things and then it will all get destroyed.
There was another. I can't find it now, but now that we're discussing them being pursued, there was one of the villages they went through that grew. There was something that it grew, and I wondered if that was the same place that Esme was in, or Esmenet was in, earlier in the book, but I couldn't find it now. I just remembered it. I don't know if that rings a bell for the review, or if it's something that I was looking too deep into it.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how close they had came to each other.
I meant to check the map, and then I didn't.
It is
Yeah, I'm
kind of
looking
weird
at the map, but I'm
that
not.
like Sarway just having Kellis be nice to her and maybe learn her language in 3 days or whatever it says he does, like becomes attached and thinks she loves Kellis. And Essenet, just by having Sarsalis be nice to her for 1 week, just gets swooned. So this world is a place where just a little bit of kindness is so out of the ordinary that it's powerful. Maybe. Or fake. Powerful or fake.
Well, that's why I wondered about the end of this this part is when they when they go down the cliff, and they're at the very last, and everything, their horses are dying, and they can't continue, and at the end, when they fall to the bottom, um, and when they find the knights at the bottom, and they tell them, uh, "So have you seen any have you seen any fugitive criminals about?" And Senor says, "Why do you ask?" And he says, "Because I'm dying for the lack of honest conversation." It's not the conclusion I was expecting for this part.
Yeah, I was confused by the very last line. I wasn't exactly sure what they were referring to, so I understood that. So the men who chased them are not the same men who encircle them at the very end. So the men who were chasing them were the Nensu or the Kintrail, right? But the men who they sort of found at the bottom of the hill, they're Conryans. They come from a Trempus, and they're part of the Holy War.
Which
But I
leads them
wasn't.
to Proyas, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Trempus? Proyas?
Yes, so a Trempus is the military fortress that Zynemus is sort of in charge of, I think. And I think the leader of this group is somehow related to Zynemus. I don't know if he's like a cousin or something. But they're definitely somehow connected to Proyas, for sure.
Was that one of the parts that you were a little bit confused with? Katerina, you mentioned there was a couple of parts and you were kind of had to reread.
Yeah, so I was mostly the parts I was confused by was mostly the sort of the mind games that Callus and Nayor play with each other, like trying to sort of decide, like guess what the other was thinking or doing, and how they were trying to sort of control each other with what they were saying. But I did get a little confused about yeah, the like the very last lines that the leader of the group that they meet at the very end, about what he said, the lines that you quoted. The because I'm dying for the lack of honest conversation. I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, but maybe it's something that we'll only find out in part 5, because I don't know exactly what happens in part 5. I haven't reread that far.
Yep, me either. I'm ready to get there. I almost started last night, but I decided I shouldn't.
When I go to get to the Warrior Prophet, I'm going to be good and just go part by part, week by week. So I'll resist the urge to skip ahead.
Well, we'll see how successful you are at that.
Yeah, I'll try.
This stuff was hard for me because I, for some reason, really like the whole chase sequence. Who knows if it was 3 days or 4 days long, but how many ever days it took.
Yeah.
And they're like contemplating if they can kill all of them. I think Mayor asks how many there are, and Kellis says 68. Mayor's like, can we kill him? Because he doesn't know how capable Kellis is, I guess. Only that he's probably more capable than him.
And he can catch arrows midair.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they bred those fast reflex or fast twitch muscles for 2,000
Yeah.
years, so they're just real good at certain things.
Yeah, I mean, I for some reason I can accept that like Kellis is intellectually superior to everyone, but the fact that he also has like ninja warrior skills as well, I found a little bit too much. Like it's a bit
It,
infuriating, honestly.
it wasn't the arrows that did that for me, it was Kellis holding Nair over a cliff with one hand.
Yeah.
I've, I've tried to hold out 100 pounds out from my body before, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's kind of tough.
So that's like some real freak strength right there. Catching arrows, I might could do that. I think there's a guy on YouTube that does that named Lars Anderson. He shoots arrows crazy and can catch them.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think he also catches the blade of Neor's sword like with his palms and just throws the sword away. Um, but yeah, holding Neor over that ridge was maybe a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I don't know. They don't make Kellis out to seem like a giant, but guess you'd never know what 2,000 years of genetic breeding can do to a group of people. When it goes into Kellis's eyes and it talks about how he doesn't see faces like human beings, like there's no such thing as a being to Kellis. It's just like everyone's an animal or a tool. An animal he can control, a bunch of muscles behind a face that he sees instead of the person in themselves. And then Serway, when it's in her eyes, she's like, "Oh, he really loves me," and she sees Kellis cry, but I don't think that a Dunane does anything without a purpose. And it talks about like when Moangus was a slave and he always just smelt like shit and he was just hunched over and sad, and then one day he just like looked like a king, like wiped away all that stuff in a heartbeat. And it says how crazy it was for Near to see like the shift because they're capable of that. They're less human, much less human.
And him convincing Nair to pose as a convert, I thought that was another. I was surprised he was able to do that because I didn't think that was something that he would ever agree to. But his it goes back to that whole back and forth of the constant maneuvering and trying to get leverage and trying to get over on each other.
Yeah, Neor is really obsessed with the idea of getting vengeance and then killing Moangus. And I guess he will, enter the trackless step in order to achieve that goal. Because killing some dude you haven't seen in 30 years is going to cure you of all your trauma that you've accumulated since you last saw him.
It's funny the way people think sometimes. I see that happen in the real world myself, though, so.
Yeah.
Not brutally, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I understand why he thinks that. But it's always interesting to me that he's someone who clearly is very intelligent and can in some ways like see through things that other people can, but then in some ways he's just very narrow-minded as well. And can see that like yeah, killing Wengus is probably not going to solve any of the problems he's been having for the past 3 decades. But I guess it speaks to the immensity of the trauma that he's carried with him since Moangus betrayed him, and how that impacted him. So I guess like at the end of the day, it's just really tragic, and like yours, like to me, is like one of the most tragic characters I really ever encountered.
I
And it's just,
remember it describing like the chaos of his life after Moangus left as a whirlwind, and he was like trying to find peace in the middle of the whirlwind. And I think like trying to become the eye of his own whirlwind by going after Moengus, I think is kind of how he sees it. He left his life in complete chaos, and if he can kill Moengus, he can become the chaos. But in reality, it won't solve anything, just like you say. Everyone thinks something's going to solve something until they get it, and then there's just something new to solve. That's humanity. That's life.
So you guys are you haven't started the last part. Neither of you have.
Nope. I you know, it takes me long enough to read this part, and I think it takes me even longer to like compile my notes.
Yeah.
So haven't really had time, but I will start once we finish this.
Cool.
And I will wait 4 days, and then I'll just try to push through real quick, like I always do. Hope it works.
Seems to be working out pretty good for you so far.
I did get a good amount of notes this time, probably twice as many as 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
Yeah, my
Anything
notes
else?
also keep getting longer.
Yeah, I started with just like a half a page of notes, and then I realized how much I was not writing down that I thought I would remember. So now it's like 2 pages of notes. Anything else you either of you can remember from this part?
Well, I'm scrolling through my extensive notes to see if we missed anything. But I think like we talked about Nayor and his history with Moengas. We talked about the Kellis and the little bit we learn about the Dunyain and how they think. And we also I think discussed Serway and her character at length, which I think like to me like those were the main points, the most important things. And I just a couple of quotes. It's mostly about Serway thinking that she's nothing, which is just heartbreaking to read. The way she just thinks of herself as like being completely worthless.
I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. What are some of the quotes that you have down? The survey.
Okay, so I have this one where she talks about justice. And she says, Justice, despite all her vanities and all her peevish sins, she meant something. She was something. She was Survey, daughter of Ingera, and she deserved far more than what she had been given. She would have dignity, or she would die hating. But then she thinks, like then Nayor basically rescues them. Like she thinks, like I think she says this when Nayor rescues them from the other Skilvendi, but then like she realizes pretty quickly that basically it's or, like her situation is not going to change for much better, and she says. Worthless fool. Ever since Nayor had thrust his blood-spattered frame against her, she had understood. There was only whim, there was only submission, there was only pain, death, and dread. Justice was but another treacherous Ganem idol. So it's a pretty hopeless way of viewing the world, but I think totally understandable in her case.
Yeah. Anything you can think of that we may have missed?
think we pretty well covered everything. If you take a hint that I gave in this part with a hint that I gave in part two, or that Katerina gave in part two, you could make a really hard deduction really early in this book, though. No spoilers, but
Yeah, I like how both of you dance around some things.
I thought the quote about the Swazons was good. Let me see if I can just find it quick.
Yeah, maybe before you find it, there was another part that I liked where I think well, it was Kellis and Nayor. They were talking about the Junyane and how they sort of deceive normal people, um, and they were sort of arguing about whether that's okay or not, like whether the fact like that the Junyane are morally superior, or sorry, not morally, intellectually superior, whether that gives them the right to manipulate other people. And Kells was sort of comparing the Janine to parents who, you know, control like control and manipulate their children into doing the things that they need them to do. And Nayor argues that like that's unfair because the normal like world born men are not able to defend themselves against the Janine. Um, and it reminded me from a quote from one of the earlier chapters. I think it's actually maybe one of the epigraphs. It's a quote from a Genesis about ignorance and deceit, and it says, "To be ignorant and to be deceived are two different things. To be ignorant is to be a slave of the world. To be deceived is to be the slave of another man. The question will always will be why when then when why then when all men are ignorant and therefore already slaves, does this latter slavery sting us so? So why are you more upset when another person deceives you, makes a fool of you, than by the fact that you are already ignorant and deceived by the world altogether? And just remind me of the conversation that Nayor and Kellis had in this part of the book, and how I guess it's like in essence Nayor's trauma and why he hates Moenga so much is because of the fact that he was deceived and that Moenga's betrayed the trust that Nayor put in him.
And why he's so hard for Kellis to navigate, because he's built up so many walls around that small incident. Probably, like, I don't know how long it said Moengus lived there, but I can't imagine longer than maybe a year. So if he was there for a year, and the next 30 years of Nair's life is like ruined by this one guy that did something to him for 1 year. And that's why when he's talking to Kellis will be like, "Oh, we should do this." And instantly, even though he's like, "Yeah, that's what I want to do," he'll say no, because he just has to second guess himself in order to conquer the Dunyane. Cut him short. Don't let him lead you anywhere. But they'll try to find other ways to lead you places. I guess that's what the next part's all about.
Could
Yeah.
be.
Well, I'm done with my quote.
I found the quote for the Swazon. It says, "The man you have killed is gone from the world, Serway. He exists only here, a scar upon your arm. It is the mark of his absence. All the ways his soul will not move, and of all the acts he will not commit. A mark of the weight you now bear." So if Nair tells her this, and that's like his belief, how much does he bear? He's killed like tons of his own uncles. He's responsible for his father's death. Like, he bears the entirety of the Utamut on. He just like left and let them all get killed, basically.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of weight. That's why all these lives that come into him are like little streams that just add to the giant river that is Nair's life, the giant track. There was another quote somewhere, but the whole section where Nair and Kellis talk to each other is crazy. Anytime you can find Kellis talking in any of these books, it's crazy. The glimpses you get behind his eyes, like first person Kellis, they're really rare and really revealing.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that originally Baker did not even want to make Kellis a POV character, which on one like that would make the book very interesting, but also I don't know how you would really be able to understand anything about his character whatsoever. Like he would be just so nebulous. Or if you would see him, I guess if you see him through the eyes of the other characters, then you would just assume that he was like a super nice and kind of person and very thoughtful, and then maybe like somewhere very late into the game where you would realize that he's like as emotional as almost like a machine type of person.
You'd only get like him leaving what's his name in the snow and just not even seeming to care, but maybe he had to do it. Until you get into his eyes and realize that humans aren't very important to him. The only thing that's important is the absolute, whatever that is, the shortest path, the probability trance. It kind of described the probability trance one time as Kellis was like riding on his horse, all the branches of what could be, and him just trying to find the best path to walk and talking to Nair, because Nair has that defense mechanism built up from his dad.
I'm glad I'm reading this with both of you because there's a lot.
It's true that it is a lot denser than a lot of other fantasy.
Definitely.
But I like dense, so that's fine. My favorite books are the books that make you think after you read them. The longer the book makes me think, generally the better I'll consider it. Bad thoughts or good thoughts. Just thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really stopped thinking about this book since the first time I read it, so it definitely falls into that category.
And they say after people read Baker, they put on like a Baker lens to the whole world where they themselves try to walk the probability trance just to help your own life out.
Or you just become
Really,
very depressed, I think.
yeah.
Or that.
That's more of the path I've taken.
I feel like
Very
it
cynical, very depressed.
made me a lot more empathetic. The world's not as depressing as this, but after reading this book, I thought a lot more about what motivates other people and what other people might be thinking. How I can trick people into doing what I want them to. The only one I found is by just saying real quick. If you tell someone real quick after you say something, they'll usually do it. It's one trick I've learned in life.
The secret, yeah. That's the secret.
You say, get me something, it's on their own time, but if you just say, oh, real quick, then it usually happens real quick.
Well, I'll try. I try that next time I'm at work. See how it goes.
We'll see how that goes. Yeah, report back next week. Let us know how that goes. I'll
Sounds
try that
good.
this week too. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thanks again. So every week I look forward to chatting with both of you. It was weird last week not talking about to you guys. So glad we're back at it this week. So we'll be back next Friday to talk about part 5, the final part.
Sounds good to me.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me, for listening.
Of course. We'll see everyone, or we'll see you. We won't see you next week, but you'll be hearing from us next week, next Friday. So thanks, everybody.